Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist. In today's video, we are discussing Rams' second-year star wide receiver Puka Nacua. We're going to take a look at a couple of advanced stats, metrics, take a look at his per-game averages with Cooper Kupp in the lineup, take a look at what, based on the past 5 years, it has taken for a wide receiver to finish as a wide receiver 1 in terms of targets, yards, touchdowns, and receptions. See what his per-game averages were with Cooper Kupp in the lineup and project those out for 17 games. See where his finish would have been. And then think about what we can reasonably project for him in 2024. Please remember to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. He was drafted at the end of the 5th round this past season and was a major surprise to everybody. Hardly anybody knew that Puka Nacua was going to be a star, let alone a stud in his rookie season. He's still only 23.2 years old, so what we saw this past season can definitely be improved upon. Looking at a couple of advanced metrics, his 4.62 40-yard dash was in the 26th percentile, which gives him a 51st percentile speed score, so slightly above average. This is because he's over 210 pounds and 6'2", running this 40-yard dash. Now, it has been reported that he was playing through injury in the combine, so that definitely could have affected his stats there. I will say, while he doesn't have elite acceleration, once he gets going, his build-up speed is really impressive. You definitely see him pulling away from defenders when he can get a straight line down the field. But overall, he's really not the athlete you would expect for somebody that finished their rookie season as the wide receiver 4. Now, when we look at his collegiate production, his 27.4 college dominator rating was in the 46th percentile. That's his market share of the team's yards and touchdowns. That's slightly below average, but it's important to know that he, at first at least, was with the Washington Huskies, so there was a lot more competition there. And then when he transferred to BYU, obviously he was able to stand out more. But he also dealt with a lot of injuries, and it limited his overall effectiveness and thus slid him down draft boards. His 22.9 target share, though, was in the 65th percentile. That's a better indicator of his actual talent compared to his teammates in college than per se his dominator rating, because he did deal with a lot of injuries in college. And his 18.3 breakout age was 98th percentile. So from a young age, he was ready to make his mark for his team and didn't need to be an older prospect beating up on 18-year-old high school kids. He was the 18-year-old high school kid beating up on college players. When we take a look at where he's going, in redraft he's going off the board as the wide receiver 7. So a couple spots lower than where he finished this past season. I do think it's wise to take him a little bit lower than his end-of-year finish this past season, because 5 of the 17 games this past season were without Cooper Kupp. And now, while he might not play every game this season, it's not a good thing to bet for somebody to be injured. In Dynasty, he's going off the board at the 208 in Superflex leagues as the wide receiver 6. I do think that's just a little bit high, but I definitely would have him as a top 10 wide receiver, both for redraft and for Dynasty. Looking at his end-of-year stats and then a couple of advanced metrics, he finished with 105 receptions, which was 8th in the NFL. That was a rookie record, so props to him. No matter what you think about him, he is a very talented player. No amount of scheming and incredible coaching and quarterback play can will somebody that's terrible into 105 receptions, especially as a rookie. Then he had 1,486 yards, which was 4th in the NFL, also a rookie record. So 2 rookie records for one Puka Nacua. Then his yards after catch, he finished with 639, which was good for 5th in the entire NFL. That is partially scheming, but he also is very good at breaking tackles. You'll see that his juke rate at 14.5% was 6th among wide receivers. He's very good at breaking tackles, and he's very elusive after the catch. He is slippery in the open field, and when he gets going, he is a freight train. Then we look at his yards per route run this past season. His 2.72 were good for 6th in the entire NFL. And his formation-adjusted yards per route run was 2.46, which was also 6th in the NFL. That stat is a predictor of somebody being very, very good. If you are not really talented, you are not going to finish with statistics like that. Then his yards per team pass attempt, which is also correlated to being a very good player. He had 2.55 this past season, which was 9th in the NFL. Overall, these metrics speak to somebody that, despite looking at his metrics in the combine, which were not above average in anything besides his total speed score, which is still only 51st percentile, this speaks to somebody who is very technically proficient. He is a very good player, just not the elite athlete by NFL standards. So, in an article from the Fantasy Footballers, it's titled The Path for Wide Receiver Ones. So, one of the key metrics to look at is targets per route run. So, when it comes to at least predicting someone being a wide receiver 2 or better, anything sub 20% is going to make it quite challenging. Well, when we look at least through week 16 of this past season, he had a 26.78 targets per route run rate, which is well over the 20%, and it was 8th in the NFL at that point. So his targets per route run, which are earned, targets are almost never given. He is especially to be top 10 in this metric, it is absolutely earned. And it's really impressive because he's a rookie. He didn't just walk into a role being signed as a free agent wide receiver where the team's going to feel the need to justify their decision to sign him. He was drafted in the 5th round, so this was on him. And what's funny is he finished with 159 total targets on 547 total routes run, which gives him a 29% targets per route run rate. That would have put him 2nd in the NFL. So once again, these are earned targets, and he is elite at earning targets, which is going to help you get fantasy points. So also from this article, wide receiver 1 marks to hit. What the Fantasy Footballers did is compiled data from the past 5 years of wide receiver 1s and figured out on average how many targets, receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns it took to be a wide receiver 1. Well, it took on average 144.6 targets, 97.4 receptions, 1,311 yards, and 9.5 touchdowns. As you can see below, Puka Nacua finished with 159 targets, more than the 144.6 on average, 105 receptions, more than the 97.4 average, 1,486 yards, more than the 1,311 yard average, but he did only have 6 touchdowns, which is less than the 9.5 average. But what's important to think about is this was with 5 games of Cooper Kupp not playing. What we need to do is we need to figure out his per-game averages with Kupp in the lineup, and then figure out what, based on the per-game averages times 17, would equal to figure out if he had been in the lineup, and assuming he would have still had the role, obviously. He might not have had the role if Kupp had been in the lineup at the beginning of the year. But we're going to take a look at his per-game averages, multiply it times 17, and then figure out if Cooper Kupp had been in the lineup for each one of these games, where Puka Nacua would have finished on the season. So once again, he would have needed, on average, 144.6 targets, 97.4 receptions, 1,311 yards, and 9.5 touchdowns on average to be a wide receiver 1. So I took a look at the 12 games in which Cooper Kupp was in the lineup. He was targeted 102 times. He finished with 62 receptions for 944 yards and 4 touchdowns in these 12 games with Cooper Kupp in the lineup. So let's figure out what his end-of-year stats would have looked like if Cooper Kupp would have played all 17 games. So I went ahead and saved y'all the time of doing that math, and I did round to the nearest whole number with all of these stats because you're not going to have half of a touchdown, obviously, or half a target or reception. But if you map out the per game stats for Puka Nacua with Cooper Kupp in the lineup and multiply that times 17, he would have finished with 144 targets, right at 0.6 under the necessary average, so essentially spot on. He finished with 88 receptions, which was about 9 below the 97 necessary generally, 1,337 yards, right over the 1,311 necessary, and 5 touchdowns. It was slightly under 5.5, so I just rounded down. Definitely under the per average touchdowns necessary. And he would have finished as the wide receiver 12. So, was he really a wide receiver 1? Yes, he was the lowest wide receiver 1, but still a wide receiver 1. Granted, the 5 games without Cooper Kupp, especially at the beginning of the season with that massive target share, absolutely helped him along. But you could have projected at the very least a very high-end wide receiver 2 as a rookie. And thinking about that, what happens to good players when they perform really well? They get more opportunity. It is absolutely reasonable for Puka Nacua to receive about reasonably the same amount of targets, receptions, and yards as he had in his rookie season. And there's a chance that he has more touchdowns. Will that happen? Maybe not, but it could absolutely happen. So then we look at his wide receiver 6 price tag in Dynasty. I would personally take Garrett Wilson over him. I just think Garrett Wilson is a much better talent than Puka Nacua, but I could understand the idea that, sure, the situation is maybe projected to be better for a little bit longer with Stafford versus Aaron Rodgers, but he's going right around where he should. Somebody that, if Cooper Kupp would have played every game, and he had the role in which he did have this past season, would have finished as a low-end wide receiver 1. But he really finished as a top 5 wide receiver. In redraft, he's going off the board as the wide receiver 7. I do think that's just a little bit too high. I personally think that Garrett Wilson is going to have a better season than him. I think that Devontae Adams will probably finish below him, as well as Marvin Harrison Jr., but I do think that there's a chance Drake London has a slightly better season than Puka Nacua with the multiple quarterback upgrades and scheme upgrade in which he has, and his competition isn't going to be quite as stiff as Puka Nacua's is, but Puka Nacua is going in a very acceptable range, and at least in my opinion, you have a perennial wide receiver 1 talent on your roster if you own him in any league. I think it would be incredibly intelligent of you to invest in Puka Nacua anytime the ADP allows you to do so without reaching. If you already own Puka Nacua, enjoy having a perennial wide receiver 1 on your team. But what do you think? Do you think that his ADP in redraft and Dynasty is a little bit rich for you? Do you think it's too low? Do you think it's spot on? What do you think about Puka Nacua in the future? Do you think that he's going to be a perennial wide receiver 1? Do you think he's going to sink just a little bit? Let me know in the comment section, and I'm really curious to know why you think what you think. With that being said, I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news source, and the Dynasty and redraft implications behind said breaking news. I am building a library of information with which you can use to dominate your redraft and Dynasty leagues in 2024 and beyond. Please remember to like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and have a good day.